Hello believers, welcome to the show. This, as you know, if you've listened before, is a podcast where we metaphorically chew on the creative output of folk from the worlds of film, TV, music, theatre, art and beyond. And we still have appetite for a separate helping of X-Files chat in there too. You're now listening to the sound of meat on a grill, sizzling away. I was going to pop down the local abattoir for this sound bed, but I realised I would have ended up with something that sounded akin to visiting the infamous death clip website rotten.com. If you ever did that as a late teenager, once seen and heard, never forgotten. But don't worry, there's no edgelords here, thank you very much. Just good, wholesome, non-provocative chat. Anyway, I hope you're well where you are. You know, I come on here each week and we talk about the importance of art and of creative people and how vital that is to everyone in society. You know, having just worked through the August festivals in Edinburgh and seen how much that creativity brings to Scotland, it's an absolute kick in the teeth to hear about Scottish Government closing the Open Fund for Individuals, which, if you don't know, is a primary route to public funding for Scottish artists when they're developing their projects. You know, I'm a new Scot, if one can identify in such a way, and of course I can't speak for all Scottish artists out there, but I think we all agree that this decision is an absolute catastrophe for creativity in Scotland. You know, a country that's founded, as previous guests have said, on a culture of storytelling. And, you know, removing that vital funding stream for artists is just going to be a death knell for this country's vibrancy. And also economically, you know, it's that age-old thing of the arts being last on the rung in terms of priorities and not seen as valuable in terms of how much they bring to local communities and also how much they bring back into the economy. So very, very short-sighted on Scottish Government's part, and I applaud all the organisations that have already signed the recent open letter that's doing the rounds decrying that decision. So if you can, if you're listening, if you feel as strongly about it as I do and as a lot of people do, then do get on social media and shout about it. Write to your local MP, do what you can, and I hope the government consider themselves telled and that they reverse this absolutely dreadful decision as soon as possible. Someone who I'm sure will echo those sentiments is today's guest. It's the thoroughly decent and thoroughly hardcore Greg Walker. Greg is a cinema and projects manager at Manchester's Cultplex cinema and is a founder of MoshFest. He's also worked on festivals such as Manchester Animation Festival, Sheffield Doc Fest and Pilot Light TV Festival. Greg talks about programming rep cinema, new audiences discovering cult films, growing up in Barrow in Furness, building your own field of dreams, why metal will never die out, content, communal TV experiences, and finally, The X-Files Season 2, Episode 10, Red Museum, in which Mulder and Scully travel to Wisconsin after several teens have been found wandering in the woods in their underwear with "He is the one" or "She is the one" scrawled on their backs. However, the duo soon stumble upon a strange cult of vegan walk-ins. There's a lot more to that episode than just that, but that's how it starts. An absolute pleasure to speak to Greg, as always, as someone who's very passionate, also very laid back at the same time. I have fond memories of him at a cinema exhibitors event in Hull many moons ago, singing "Fight for Your Right to Party" at a karaoke night, and I have to say it was a pretty sensational rendition of that song. As always, if you like our show, please do leave me a message, subscribe and review. Follow us on X. We're getting sick of X. Yeah, I mean, we're on Threads, so don't know. It's hard to remove yourself from X, isn't it? Because then it's just going to become even more of an echo chamber for the alt-right. We're also on Instagram and YouTube. Anyway, this has been even more of a diatribe than normal. And in the meantime, in the words of Mr. Paul McCartney, Remember, pledge.meatfreemondays.com. You can do it right now, please. Here's Greg. So, I mean, I usually start by asking people how they are. I mean, how are you?
Yes, I'm good. Yeah, very busy at the minute, but it's good busy, which makes a change because usually it's quite frantic, because my background's been festivals for the past few years, but this is the first year that it's not. So like around this time, most years, it'd be Sheffield Doc Fest, as it's been the past few years. Would be probably announcing the lineup in the next 2 weeks. But now I'm just constantly working on Cultplex, which is the cinema that I'm working at now. So it's just that kind of constant busyness, but it's just a different type of business, which is it's a bit more fun.
Is that because I've followed them for a while, but I've only just really clocked how cool it is, and it's like literally everything they post about. I think, I'd love to go and watch that. And they were just showing Thief a while back, I think.
Yeah, we're doing that in a couple of weeks. Yeah,
brilliant. So how have you got involved with that then? And whereabouts? I'm trying to figure out where it is in Manchester. And is it quite a new cinema that's been set up?
It's newish. So in 2019, at the end of 2019, a very very small version of it opened. And that's when I started chatting to them, because I used to run something called Rad Screenings, which was like a cult film promoter type thing where we did all sorts of retro films. So I was just chatting to them about doing some events there. And then obviously 2020 happened. And so that ended up moving out of that space and then into the space that we're in now, which is in Green Quarter in Manchester. It's about 5 minutes away from Victoria train station. It's literally like... It's just like one road over from the furthest people associate with the town centre. That's a battle we constantly have. But in the current guys, we've been there for about 2 years now, and so the past few years, it started out I was just doing stuff with Rad there, and then it started to get to a point where Rad wasn't doing as much, and so I just started programming with them, basically just giving my advice on industry stuff and programming ideas and things like that, because the guys who were running it, they came from a background of kind of running food and drinks venues, but always wanted to start a cinema because they're all film buffs. So I just came at it with that kind of some practical experience to it, really, and then just sort of late last year, really, that it's gone so well. It's got to a point where do you want to come in full time, because we need it now. So I've been doing that since January. And running a cinema's always been the kind of end goal dream. So it's pretty exciting to be doing it now.
Oh yeah. What's the capacity of the place then?
At the minute it's 100, which is it's a good.
Well, it's decent, isn't it? It's decent if you're doing well with that. That's really encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, it's decent, but we just keep filling it, which is it sounds like I'm complaining because I sort of am, but it's great. But we know we could do so there's some events we know we could do 250 tickets. Yeah. Sure. So it's just a matter of we're actively looking for new spaces to kind of build a new Cultplex at some point in Manchester, but it's just building a cinema. You need a very specific type of room, for raked seating, you need a high ceiling and all that sort of stuff. So they're the kind of factors we're looking at, but it is great. We've built a little community over the past 2 years. We've got over 100 members now, which is really, really cool. And the bulk of them are lifetime members as well, which is awesome. Right. So it's a really wholesome project to be involved with.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than a poor rake, is there?
Yeah,
I can't bloody see.
Absolutely.
That's cool. So how many nights a week is that? Is it like a Friday night and a weekend thing, or is it you running stuff all week?
It's usually from Thursday onwards, sometimes Wednesday, but it is mostly into the weekends, really. And it's absolutely packed now. We've got loads of new promoters coming in as well.
Right, cool.
Which is really exciting. We try to do that as much as we can because, you know, we can only programme so much from the history of cinema. And there's some other people who, you know, just know way more than us about certain things. So we just let them run free. And it's really interesting, some of them that have come in too. Like,
Yeah.
these promoters called Outside In. And their whole thing is like adventure films and like outdoors films.
Okay.
And they started from scratch like earlier in the year, and then they were selling out after like the 5th event. So it's cool getting them people in and helping them cultivate their audience.
Wow. Have you noticed then a kind of shift in the sort of people, you know, since you started putting on films and you were involved in festivals? Have you noticed a shift in the sort of people that would come out to them? And have you noticed, is there more of an appetite now for, I don't want to say specialist event cinema, but you know, the sort of rep cinema that you're tending to program there?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for us, but like I feel a lot of the time when I was doing it, you know, sort of it was mainly around kind of 2014 onwards I started doing this, and then it was quite consistently sort of, you know, mid-20s through to like kind of 40-year-olds coming through, that sort of thing. And that was quite consistent for a while, but just really recently, over the past year, like, it's awesome to just see how much younger audiences are starting to, like, care about this kind of thing, really.
Right.
And it's, like, stuff you just don't expect. Like, you know, we put a screening of Hellraiser on, and it was, like, one of the youngest, most diverse audiences we'd ever seen in the cinema. Like, and who would have sort of thought that would be one of the films? And, like, in past years, we've done an Oscars watch along.
Right, okay, fab.
And but the past few years, it's been admittedly a little bit of a slog to get people in, because, you know, it is on a Sunday night into the early hours of the morning. But this year, like, we sold it out, and it was all just like all under 25s, really. And it was like, it was a sporting event. Everyone was like absolutely cheering when people won and lamenting when people lost, and it was absolutely awesome. So it's really cool to get them people in, and, you know, they're our members as well, and just talk to them about the programming too, because, you know, we like to know what kind of things they want to see too.
Yeah, I think it's been really encouraging, actually, seeing people come back to cinema, obviously after the, you know, pandemic and people not being able to get in and see films in a crowd. But the whole Oppenheimer, you know, the whole Barbenheimer thing was just, I live in Edinburgh, and I just went to the local View to see Oppenheimer, and just watching people come in all dressed in pink, or there's one guy who's dressed in a full hazmat suit for Oppenheimer. And it was just like, I don't remember the last time when people were this excited to see, maybe the early stage of the Marvel films, but it was just, I was really buzzing about it, and I was getting like really sort of like old man teary, you know, in the screen, going, this is so nice, because every so often, every sort of couple of years, if it's not Peter Greenaway, it's someone else saying, cinema's dying, why are we all sat in this darker room watching this screen, you know, we've not tapped the potential, you know, there's all just people sat at home watching streaming, it's going to die. And it's like, no, it's not. The experience of getting together and watching a film, it's always there, and I love that. And it's so nice to hear you've got a growing audience there of younger people, you know, still prepared to come out and watch a film together. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, and it's that experience. That's what we're all about. Like, and I think it's for a lot of people, it's having that experience for the first time sometimes, where it feels more like an event. Because, like, I mean, it's interesting because, like, it's the multiplex audience which is the hardest for us to reach, because that we feel like it's almost a passive experience for a lot of people going to the multiplex. It's like, you go, you watch the film, you leave, you'll probably talk about it a bit afterwards. But for us, like, a big part of it is, you know, it's getting people in an hour before to just, like, hang out in the venue, hang out with fellow film fans, and then have a really good experience in the cinema, which, you know, we have some rowdy screenings. I mean, like, there's some where it's purpose built for that, you know, like Screening the Room or things like that, or like Rocky Horror and things like that. But then it's like, there's some that just surprise you, like we did Killer Clowns from Outer Space last year.
Oh, fab.
And, you know, like, we screen cult horrors all the time, but that one was just rowdy as hell. It was just really unexpected, but really awesome. And again, quite a young audience who'd just heard of these kind of films, but quite a few of them aren't, slap bang there, ready for you to stream. So they'll come and watch them with us, and then once they've had that experience, it's like the hearts and minds have been won. And I think that's what happened with the whole Barbenheimer thing. I mean, like, I went to go see Barbie, I think it was even like 3 weeks after it came out, and it was still packed. There was still people dressing up. Like Home, the cinema in Manchester, it was just absolutely rammed, and it was like a Tuesday night or something like that. It was just really, really cool to see.
So nice. I mean, are you so where are you from originally then, Greg? And what was your local cinema growing up?
I'm from Barrow in Furness, which is in Cumbria. It's a bit of a sort of industrial cul-de-sac. When you say the Lake District, a lot of people think, oh wow, lakes and green and all that sort of stuff. But that was about an hour away from where we lived. It's basically a shipbuilding town. I'll never forget, I was early in my career, I was at this industry event, and somebody from, I think it was Creative England or something like that, said, we've got these funds and it's to support places where creativity goes to die, like Barrow in Furness.
Oh no!
And I was just sat there like, I'm not gonna argue with you. Yeah, fair dues. Yeah. So it's kind of one of them towns where if you don't want to kind of work in the services or work in the shipyard or retail, then there's nothing for you, really. Which is quite sad. I mean, some people make it work, but a lot of people just escape, like I did. But cinema-wise, it's sad because it's not there now, and I can't remember the name of it, but we had just a really old, classic cinema, and it was absolutely beautiful. Like, I'm in a few kind of historical cinema groups now on Facebook, and occasionally people post pictures of it in there. It was just absolutely gorgeous, but it got knocked down, and it's like an insurance building or something now, which is very sad. But I remember that very well, like queuing up outside. Like, my earliest memory was going to watch 101 Dalmatians.
Oh, that's nice.
And but I remember going to the toilet during it and then accidentally walking into Braveheart on the way back. And it's like, it's one of them really early core film memories. Just been like, what is this? Who's this man covered in blood, screaming, blue face paint on? But that's one of the earliest ones. But that got knocked down a few years later, and then after that, it's just a view. That's all there is now. There's a thing called Signal Cinema, which is a very indie thing attached to an arts organisation, but it's not like a full-time cinema. It's more like an events room where they occasionally do screenings. I
am very nostalgic about how many cinemas there used to be, and it's hard not to look back and think about a cinema being in every town, and every in Edinburgh there used to be, there was one in Portobello, there was definitely a couple in town, and it's the whole Plight of the Film House. I'm glad that's coming back, and there's a concerted effort from a group of people to get that back. But I certainly remember in Chesterfield it was such a big thrill to go to the ABC or whatever it was then, and my first time, I think it was going to see Home Alone 2 with my dad. Awesome. And it was in the dying throes of this cinema because they couldn't even afford the heating. So we had to sit there with our blankets over our knees and just like shiver, But it actually worked. It worked for it, given it's a Christmas time.
Yeah, film. Immersive screening.
Yeah, quite. I don't know. I guess it's even more important now to be able to just switch off. And there's films I can't. I had to go and see the Scorsese film at the cinema because there's no way I'm going to be able to sit and watch this in one chunk. 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
In one go. But I'm glad there is a kind of concerted effort from lots of people to try and retain the sort of cinematic experience and keep it alive, which is so nice. So and what about your kind of love of metal as well, because you just mentioned Braveheart there, and I think there's probably a direct correlation between seeing a man screaming with blood on his face and long hair into a lifetime of enjoying loud music. Never made
that connection before.
Yeah. Is there something kind of that stood out in terms of I know what it is because I've read your biog on the Mosh Festival website, but I'd love to hear you talk about how you fell in love with heavy music.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, somebody asked me a question about this a few weeks ago, and I think somebody had asked me like if I had to pick sort of Desert Island 3 songs, and I realised that they were all tied to film as well, and I've just never made that kind of connection between how intrinsically linked it all is. So
Right.
two really sort of core ones for me were Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine being at the end of The Matrix.
Yes, yeah.
Like metal was never really around me, and then I heard that and I was like, whoa. Like, firstly, I'd just watched The Matrix, so I was like, what was that? And then Rage Against the Machine at the end, and I was like, what is this? So instantly was hooked on that. So I started to get into stuff, and it was kind of new metal and pop punk at the time.
Yeah.
But then my uncle had bought a home cinema system, and he'd read in some magazine that a great thing to test it with was Metallica's S&M Live, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a concert which they did with the San Francisco Philharmonic Orchestra.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's still, if I had to ask me a favourite album, it still would be that, even though it's a bit of an Alan Partridge answer, because it is kind of a best of Metallica. But it's before Fuel, their song, and he put that on, and I was sat there, and it's like Kirk Hammett, and he's like making his guitar sound like a car revving up. And like little old me was sitting there like that surround sound orchestra and guitars and everything. I was like, oh, I want more of this, please. So that was a major sort of turning point, because then after Metallica, it all just rolled from there, getting into thrash and then everything else that just sort of branches out from there, really. And it is, I imagine for millions of people over decades, it is that kind of life-changing thing, because that's, it's how you meet your friends, and it just does shape who you are quite a lot.
Yeah. No, definitely. I was thinking back as well. I was thinking, I think it was probably Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey and the Faith No More track in there.
Yeah.
And I didn't have no concept of, what is that? I can't remember what that track.
It's not We Care a Lot, is it? No, what is it?
It's the Drive into the Desert. I can hear it in my head.
Are you not thinking of Megadeth?
I think they might be on the soundtrack as well, but it's definitely Faith No. I'll find out.
Because I know that when they be like get to the big rock in the desert, I know that's Megadeth, because that's one of my friends' moments. Go to Hell by Megadeth.
Yeah, but there's just something about that I just thought it was just so cool, and kind of, you're right, it just sort of unlocks a whole world of like. Then you start looking back and you think, well, where's this band come from, and what are they influenced by? And then it opens up Sabbath and
exactly,
and then also start looking forward and finding out what's happening at the moment. But did you go and see Metallica when they were in Manchester?
Yes, I think last time. Yeah, I mean that was a mind-blowing one for me. I mean, this sounds like a brag, but it was just like a one of them sort of full circle moments, because just like, with doing events, like I couldn't afford to go the last time round again, but I've seen them about 10 times already.
Yeah.
But then like just through events and like people I've worked with doing film events, somebody was like, "Oh, I've got spare tickets to Metallica. You free tonight?" And I was like, "Yes, of course I'm free to come see Metallica for free." Just like basically being on the guest list for Metallica, I was like, it was kind of a bit of a pinch me kind of moment.
It's what you listen to at the minute that you're liking at the minute.
Well, it's an interesting one. I mean, it's not metal at all, but an album I'm obviously obsessed with at the minute is Chapel Roan's album, which came out last year, which is just very hyper pop, if anything, which is great. But I mean, the main thing for me at the minute is like in the past sort of 3 years, I've really got into hardcore.
Okay,
and it's just an exciting thing. I just love getting into new subgenres of kind of heavy music, because you get to listen to the best albums in that genre for the first time.
Is that like Black Flag hardcore, or like Code? I don't know why Code Orange came to my mind, but like that sort of hardcore, is it?
More sort of like your kind of Hatebreed kind of hardcore, that sort of like New York hardcore, your Agnostic Front,
right.
Yeah, your sort of your slam dancing kind of hardcore.
Nice.
Yeah, because I don't know what I think I'd always had a passing interest, but it had always been through the kind of crossover thrash kind of side,
Yeah.
which is obviously, it's a bit more kind of, that's more on the thrash side, really, with just some hardcore elements. But yeah, it's really got into that recently. So it's just been great digging into bands like Marauder and things like that, and like, you know, Hatebreed's early albums, and just going over them for the first time in the past few years.
Do you, I mean, how's your, because I know from your past working across various festivals, that's like totally stressful, and it's a sort of conveyor belt, isn't it? And I know a lot of people go from working one festival to the next, and it just seems like such a washing machine of like emotions. But I'm just interested to know how you kind of deal with that, and do you turn to music to unwind, or do you have various kind of mechanisms you put in place to sort of de-stress and calm yourself down?
I mean, music's definitely one of them. I remember when it was like peak of a festival last year. I think it was about a week before the festival, and I went to go see Cannibal Corpse, and that was
Yeah.
it was such a cathartic experience. Just being there, surrounded by people. I was literally just moshing with a bunch of strangers. It was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, music's definitely a part of it, but it's more for me these days playing music, like just playing guitar and playing bass, because with no kind of pressure on it. Like, you know, in previous years it would have been like pressure to write or pressure to get better at it and things like that. But like, I'm at a point with skill wise now where I'm comfortable and I can do what I want on it and not struggle. So it's just that kind of just, it sounds cheesy, but it's almost that sort of like kind of mindfulness kind of thing where it is just you're just sitting doing that, and there's no agenda. It's like you're just present, sitting playing it, and you know, I'll record riffs, but there's no pressure to do anything with them and things like that.
Right,
so it's that's a really big one, and also just gaming as well. Like, you know, I don't have time to do it all the time, but that's another one where it is just that kind of, it's just something where you have to be present to do it. And that really helps, because you can't sit and worry about work when, you know, you've got all this sort of mad stuff happening on screen and everything. So I think they're definitely the main ones that have helped in previous years. But with festivals as well, you know, it's who you work with as well. Like some of the team, like the Doc Fest team is absolutely amazing. They're an amazing bunch of people. Working with them and socialising with them outside of the office hours as well, that really helps get through things too, because there is a very much like, you know, it sounds silly when you talk about like being in the trenches and it's just a film festival, kind of the job that a lot of people would love instead of what they're doing. But you know, there is that camaraderie. You know, you are troops all working together to do something and really working hard and just going above and beyond to get it done, and then just, you know, having a few beers does help.
Yeah, I think it's really sort of testament to that Docfest team about how much that festival's grown over the years, because there's been different, it's like the same with any festival, isn't it? Like different artistic directors come and go, but I imagine that the sort of team comes back most years, and it's really like, I'm just like totally bowled over by, you know, what they do with the festival and how it plays in different spaces, and, you know, how it's embraced VR and, you know, lots of different ways of how you can tell stories and how you can tell documentaries in a really interesting way. So I'm always keen to kind of come back to Sheff and see what's going on with that festival.
Yeah, it's great. I've been a little bit sad to not be going back to Sheffield this year. Like, I love Cultplex, but I'm just going to miss my little usual kind of month-long holiday to Sheffield, because the team there is absolutely great. And like you said, you know, you get these different sort of changes in regime, so to speak, when the creative team changes every now and again. But like the team they've got there at the minute with like Annabelle and Raoul, they're absolutely fantastic. And there's somebody there who's like an unsung hero because he's never in any press releases, but there's a guy called Matt Steele, and he's like the kind of head of production and operations, and he's been there for like, I think a good like 10-15 years now. And like, you know, the festival would not happen without him, but because it is kind of an operations role, you know, you never hear about him in any of the press releases or anything. So that's a shout out to Matt Steele, who he just holds the team together, and you know, that sort of taking over of the city and all that kind of stuff, that is very much something that he's cultivated and built. And when I joined Doc Fest, it was one of the first times I've like worked with somebody and I've been like, wow, like I can really learn from you and like almost start to idolize, just be like, you're very, very skilled and I'm learning a lot, which that was one of the first times that happened in my career, so that was really cool.
Were you, I remember the last time that I think we had a beer in person in Home, and you run about going down to London. You had a meeting she used to work for, it was something to do with Pilot TV Festival that you were working with at the time.
Yeah.
But I was really like, just happy that you were like, oh no, I hate it, this is like my third time going to London and I hate it. Like, brilliant. And I was just so like, because it feels like, essentially when I was growing up, a kind of impetus for everybody to go to London, you've got to be in London to do your thing. And it's like, I don't know, having lived in London for about 10 years, there's almost a feeling like there's London and then there's like the regions, and it's such a like snooty way of looking about what's actually all happening in the rest of the country that's so, exciting and brilliant. But I really kind of admired your like, no, we're doing this thing in Manchester. This is what we're doing. This is what the community is, and I don't need to, you're going down to London for logistical reasons or to to chat to people from Netflix or whatever you were doing. But I really liked that. I mean, has there been any part of you that ever thought, I'll go and live there, or want to go anywhere else, or have you always kind of liked what was happening in Manchester and felt satisfied there and felt good about it?
I mean, early career, I'd always said, like, it was even after a first couple of times going down for work, it was similar to what I said to you. I was just like, I can't bother with this. I've done on meetings and that's it. But then, so I'd always said, I'd move down there for my dream job. But as I got through my career, I went through a good few years of being like, what even is my dream job now? I've got no idea what it is, like with where I'm at in my career now, and just getting to learn more about the industry. And now I'm at this kind of point where, I have my dream job now. Like I've always wanted to run a cinema, and now I'm doing that. Yeah. So I can't imagine what would pull me down there, to be honest. Because a few people, there's been jobs that have come up down there where a few people have been like, oh, you seem like a good fit for that. Why don't you apply? And I'm just like, it's just not enough to pull me down there. Like, it's like not even kind of like money would really. Because I just love living up north, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. Like, I love Manchester, and like when I'd been working in Sheffield, I grew to absolutely adore Sheffield as well.
Yeah.
And I think I'd only be pulled to Sheffield, or like, if somebody had something, like Scotland is another one where like I'm the opposite to London. I'd like happily, if somebody had an opportunity in Scotland, I'd love to look at Scotland. But it's just a weird one. I don't know. I love Manchester and your places like Sheffield, because there's always a likelihood you're going to bump into somebody There might be kind of less industry up here. I mean, there's still a lot, but there's a lot less in London. But I just like that, being able to bump into people, be it work acquaintances or friends, anywhere. And I just really like that aspect of it. And just it feels like it's easier to grow communities. Obviously, I've got no experience of doing that in London. But yeah, I just love the north of England. I think it's something that everyone should experience. And I find that a lot of people who, like, you probably know Jason Wood, who used to be a creative director of film at home. Like, when he moved up, like, I think, he ended up being back at the BFI, but I think he's still very much based up north because, he got infected by what we've got up here as well. Just absolutely loved it, and just couldn't imagine moving back down to London. And I think that's just a testament to it, really. Just life is, we could struggle a bit more because of politics and, how budgets are spread and things like that. But it is just better vibes.
Yeah, I think there's a definite, like, healthier approach to life and to work. And I remember when I was when I moved back to Sheffield and I was working out of Manchester, and I'd go into the office in Manchester, just at the bottom of Canal Street, and there was one day where I think I'd got a client who was, I don't know if they were LA based or something, but they wanted to put in a meeting for like 6 at night, and I was all, still in this kind of London PR mentality. I was like, okay, fine. And then I'd ask the rest of my colleagues around me, and they were like, no, we leave at 5:30. So Steve's got volleyball, we're going to go and see Batman. It's like, we're not, it was inconceivable that you'd have a meeting at 6. And I was like, right, this makes total sense now. And why did I ever allow myself to be, I suppose you do when you're kind of getting involved in a job, don't you? When you go along with whatever the culture is. But something really clicked to me, and I was like, I don't need to be putting myself through that ringer of having to jump through that hoop again. So I really made me chuckle that, and I was like, I'm gonna take that with me on throughout the rest of my life.
Good.
I like it. Just before we get onto some Mulder and Scully chat, I was just going to ask you about Pilot TV Festival, and if you think do you think there is an appetite? I mean, firstly, how did that go when you were working on it? And do you think there's an appetite for a TV, just a purely TV festival, or just interested to hear your experiences with that? Or do you think everything's totally interlinked now, and content in inverted commas is so, you've got filmmakers working on HBO shows or whatever? Do you think it's, in order for a festival like that to thrive, it needs to be a bit more interlinked?
I mean, it's a hard one to say now, to be perfectly honest, because basically Pilot Light TV Festival, it was an amazing project, and I learned so much stuff pulling that together and made so many connections, but it was extremely hard to do, both logistically and financially.
Right.
And a lot of that comes from the fact that I wasn't from the industry, and I'm not saying it's kind of I was an outsider coming in, but a lot of almost all of the successful festivals were started by people who had been veterans in the TV industry. So they had a lot of connections for pulling events together, but most importantly for pulling in funding from broadcasters and from production companies. Whereas, I was just coming at it as I know how to run festivals and I love TV. Please come to this. But yeah, I think it's tricky in recent years, because since we did Pilot Light, there's now we're in this, I mean, even when we were doing it, there was that kind of peak TV period where there was a lot of great TV being made.
Yeah. And
peak TV was a great way to describe it, but now we're at this kind of peak content.
Yes. Yeah,
which is a very different thing. And it was actually at Pilot Light that Matt Zolosites, the film critic, he said on one of our panels, he was like, mark my words, in a few years everyone's going to stop referring to everything as TV, and they're going to start talking about content, and everything's just going to get merge a bit more. So I think a content festival to me isn't an attractive prospect, but I still think one of the core parts of Pilot Light to me, and why I started it, was that communal TV watching experience. And that was born out of being in a pub and watching the last episodes of Breaking Bad with about 50 people. Yeah. And it was just an awesome experience. And even last year, just behind closed doors, a bunch of friends of Cultplex, a bunch of the Doc Fest people came over as well. We watched the finale of Succession at Cultplex, just in the cinema during the day. And that was fantastic, watching that with a group of people. So I still really, really believe that that's an important thing. And through Cultplex, I'm still doing that kind of programming. So it's the 25th anniversary of Spaced this year.
Yep, great.
So we're doing a marathon of that. So still doing that stuff. It's the rights situations are still really hard to clear, but it's worth it because you just get all these fans in for the full day, and it's fantastic. So I think that aspect is still there. But when it comes to, your wider festival, your panels and all that sort of stuff around kind of TV, I do think that this move to it all being content does muddy the water a bit, because there's just so much stuff being churned out. Yeah. If you were to work with networks and whatnot to pull together all these panels, who knows if anything's going to be, one, good, and then two, who knows if it's even going to last for that long because of tax write-offs or whatever other stuff is happening in the kind of streaming world right now. So yeah, it's a tricky one at the minute. But that communal viewing experience, I think, is something that people still love and people are still coming out for. And I hope that some distributors do start looking at that kind of thing. And, you know, like Disney could easily do some of their big TV shows. They could easily premiere them in cinemas, and they could easily make an absolute killing doing it as well. And I hope they do, because it would obviously, it gets more audiences in the cinema. It, you know, might not be film, but it gives them that cinema experience that we were talking about, of, you know, being in an excited room and people audibly reacting and all that sort of thing. So I hope they do. But yeah, I think that is the main one. It's that viewing experience, which I think will continue on, really, from what we were doing on Pilot Light.
I have to be so ruthless now, and my partner says, "Oh, do you fancy watching this?" And it's like, is it 5 stars in my mind? Otherwise, I ain't sitting down. But first, is it HBO or FX?
Yes, absolutely.
You know, it's really bad of me, but you know, years gone by, I would have taken. What was that? There was a show. Oh, You're the Worst, right?
Absolutely, love You're the Worst. Yeah,
it was so good.
Yeah,
but the first episode of that, if I'd have just switched off and gone, "Oh, this is about some really annoying people and an annoying British guy," and you know, it's really cringy, you know. I would have totally not been won over by how wonderful it was and where it went. But this, I'm just like so ruthless about. Just can't. I ain't got capacity to do it. You know.
Yeah, you've just got to choose really carefully, and a lot of the time it just ends up being new seasons of shows that you like. Like I just finished watching the 3rd season of Dave, to speak of an FX show, and like that is just absolutely fantastic. It's along them sort of lines, you know, of that kind of You're the Worst, Atlanta, just all these great shows that they make where, you know, they're kind of somewhat comedy, somewhat drama. And like that is like the last episode of that 3rd season. It's one of the best episodes of TV I've watched in a very, very long time.
What's that called? Dave?
Dave, yeah. I mean, it's another one of the ones that's a really hard sell to people, because it is just basically, it's about this white rapper in LA who's a bit of a kind of, like, I mean, he gets frustrated by it's part of the story where he constantly gets compared to the Lonely Island. And it's this is a selling point, but it's full of cameos, and like it's just a really great sort of drama comedy about kind of the industry. But yeah, the last episode of the 3rd season, it just turns into like a kind of home invasion horror. And at the start of the episode, Brad Pitt makes a really brief cameo. But then about 10 minutes into the episode, he is like one of the main featured characters in the entire episode. And it's just one of the things where it just reminds you how good he is. And that's a big feat for a TV show to do in like a 20-minute episode, really. You'll love it. Yeah.
So when I emailed you about coming on the show, and thank you very much for coming on, you said you were familiar with the first 3 seasons of the X-Files, but your partner was doing a bit of a marathon of them and trying to get them all through. Did you watch it when you were growing up then, when it was first on?
No, not at all. I came to it fairly later in life, to be honest. It was a weird one where I kind of worked backwards, where I'd watched Breaking Bad and then got a bit interested in what Vince Gilligan was doing, and then I'd watched Homeland and saw there was a few writers on that who'd worked on X-Files, and my partner had watched it back in the day, so we started watching it together. But then it was like, you know, that sort of peak TV period that I was talking about. We got to like the end of that 3rd season, but then it was the point where there was just no time to binge something old, because there was so many episodes of new stuff coming out. I think it'd be like on one night you'd have like a new Halt and Catch Fire episode, a new episode of The Leftovers, a new episode of Game of Thrones. And that's only the dramas, and then there's all like the comedies as well. So it was a mad time in TV about 5 years ago. So then we just stopped there and just never really got back. And then it got to that point where it was like, do I have the time to start watching a TV show again where it's like 25 episode seasons and
It's
they're all
a
an hour
lot
long
to get through.
and I barely have any
Yeah.
spare time and I want to watch new shows as well. So I never did, but she's just started rewatching it. But she can watch stuff while she's doing things, and I cannot do that. I'm absolutely terrible at that. So she's flying for it, but I need to sit there and concentrate. So that's why I never went any further with it. But what I did watch, I did absolutely adore. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Yeah, this one episode we're going to talk about is season 2, episode 10, Red Museum, written by Chris Carter, directed by Win Phillips. And it's essentially, it revolves around this cult called the Red Museum, who sort of identifies vegetarian. We get a start of the show where we've got all these cows. Then we're inside this abattoir. There's people finishing up for the day. We follow one of the workers going home. She speaks to her 2 boys, and the 2 boys are watching like news footage of what I initially thought was like police and FBI agents busting into Waco or something like that. I thought there was like a direct reference to people watching that sort of thing on the news in the 90s. But this mum's gets 2 boys to order a pizza. One of the elder boys picks up the phone when the phone rings and goes out. We're not really sure why. And then we get a bit where it's quite a long opening scene where the mum's undressing to go in the shower and there's a kind of peeping Tom. We get this point of view of someone looking through at her from a kind of cupboard. And then we're back into the forest and the older boy is kind of staggering around. He's got covered in scratches. He's in his white pants and the local sheriff turns up, kind of calms him down, says, "Oh, is that Gary? Is that Gary K?" Turns around and the kid's got "He is the one" written on his back in black marker.
And the policeman's like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, and then we get the credits. But what did you think of this one? Diving straight in, and you obviously you know what the show is. The kind of the setup of it. But did you enjoy just visiting this one as a kind of one-off?
Yeah, it's great. It is just like, I think it's a really... I'm glad you picked this one because it is... I did really enjoy it. I feel like it's kind of like X-Files in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Really, because it's one of them ones where, like, sometimes you have your kind of monster of the week, or you kind of have your one that's a bit more kind of the overarching conspiracy kind of story. But this, I feel like it really does have a bit of everything. Like, it starts off with like, oh, is this a possession kind of thing?
Yeah. And
then it gets into the kind of conspiracy theory, and then it's like, oh no, it's aliens, and then the wider story arc comes in again. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed revisiting this one because, yeah, like I said, it's a nice balanced X-Files episode. It's got a bit of everything in it.
I was hoping for a little more of a kind of pointed kind of nod and wink to the... I mean, I guess it is about the meat industry to a certain extent, but I did think when he spins around and he is the one written on his back, and then later in the episode a girl goes missing and the same thing happens to her, she is the one's written on the back. I did think that maybe there was a conversation at some point where they were going to be branded, and like cattle. And I did think, well, why have we got this black marker, And maybe in in another of the episodes, there's a serial killer going about, almost like Krug from Last House on the Left. He's like carving stuff into his victim's chest. But maybe they drew the line at like doing it to teenagers. But I did think it was a bit like, I just didn't really get that black marker thing.
Yeah.
It's like, someone's written on them. Oh, that's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, because like the guy who was kind of kidnapping them, it was kind of like, well, once he was found out, it was like, oh, why is he doing it? And there's not really much explanation to it. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, it has got a lot of things going on, and like I think that it's kind of a pro and a con. Like, there's a lot of X-Files pro going on in there, but then like some of it doesn't get developed. But I mean, it's still a great episode. I mean, one of the things that I absolutely adored about it was it gives you a bit of a nostalgia on TV production almost, is just how great everything looked. And I think because it was all just so grounded in where it was supposed to be. Like, all the forest stuff was actually shot in a forest, and like around the town, it was all real locations. And even that plane crash, like, that would be CGI.
Oh yeah.
But this was a show fairly early in its run, and that was a full-on massive explosion, and it just pulls you in so much more. Like, you know, when you talk about the synopsis at the start, like it, you know, it sounds silly, a big vegan cult, but
yeah,
like that grounding it in, you know, you actually feel like you're in the kind of American sticks. They've not just shot somewhere 20 minutes out of LA.
Yeah.
It really pulls you into the mystery of it all a lot more.
Well, I totally didn't realise that this episode was originally slated to be a kind of crossover episode with a show called Picket Fences. Have you ever heard of that show?
It rings a bell, but I don't think so properly, no.
It's, I think it's another like weird Americana style show, but from what I've gleaned from the internet, it had Tom Skerritt in it as a local sheriff, and all manner of odd things are going on in this town. So I think what happened was Chris Carter met up with the creator of that show, David E. Kelly, who went on to co-create Ally McBeal and loads of stuff, and they slated it for it's going to be a whole crossover thing, and then later you'd have X-Files characters popping into Picket Fences at some point. But then I think they got quite far with it, and then the execs at whatever it was, CBS or whatever, said, well, you know, Picket Fences goes out on a Friday night, and that's like death slot or something. So it was like a kind of arbitrary, we're just not doing this. We're not going to put any more effort into what could be like, you know, a nuclear bomb of 90s TV, these two crossover moments, which is such a shame, you know, if that would have ever happened. But it is, I totally agree with you. I think it's a really good episode, this, and a really kind of great encapsulation of what the X-Files is. You've got, I mean, kind of quite a shameless little moment with Scully eating these ribs in this barbecue restaurant. Getting like sauce all over her face. I was like, this is totally shameless. And then Mulder wipes it off, you know, in a kind of quite cute way.
Yeah, it's not like any kind of discrete chemistry there in the slightest.
Not at all. But you've also got some great cast members in this. Steve Easton, he's I mentioned Killers of the Flower Moon earlier. He's been a jobbing actor for a while, and he popped up in that recently. And then you've got the guy who was in charge of the cult, Odin. He's played by Mark Rolston, who most people will remember as Drake from Aliens. So he's and then he went on to be in, you know, he's in Lethal Weapon 2 and Shawshank and loads of really cool films. And then I also saw that he played he's done a lot of games voiceover. So he was like Norman Osborn in the new Spider-Man games. And then I think he played who else did he play? Someone like Lex Luthor he's always the bad guy basically, but he plays it quite well, because you are working your way through the episode thinking, like you say, it's the cult that's at fault, and we realise it's not. It's a whole thing to do with the purity control, black goo business, and trying to impregnate these kids. I mean, is it or isn't it? Because I kind of got to the end of the episode, and then if you needed voiceover at the end of an episode to kind of try and convince you what's happened in the episode,
yeah, absolutely,
a bit like, okay, right, just to make totally sure of what's you've all got your head around what's going on. But yeah, I did really like it, and I liked. I made a note to mention that the two kids sat in the pickup truck listening to that alt rock track. I was like, "What's that? What's that track?"
I had exactly the same note. I was like, "It sounds like Scott Stapp tried to do a James Hetfield impression, whatever it was."
Yeah, I was like, let's track this down, and I think it's a band called God's Children, which makes total sense given the episode, and a track called Count the Time. But I couldn't really discover much about God's Children other than they're from Niagara Falls, and they had a couple of hits, and I think they were on Letterman at one point. But
that could be a future guest.
Yes, yeah. I wonder what they're doing now. Yes, come on. But I always like that in films and TV, where it's like, as you probably know, you know, having done Mosh Festival recently, it's like the bad kids have to be listening to metal because they're bad, and it's the the music of the devil.
Yeah, absolutely. And then anyone who knows, metalheads knows that most people are just absolutely lovely, and it's not the case at
nice
all.
Folk. Yeah, totally nice folk. Did it go well, Mosh? You've just had that, haven't you?
Yeah, it was last weekend. Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. It was really cool. Like some of the films we had on with, it's a really nice mix this year. It was great to see heavy metal on the big screen again.
Right, yes.
Which some of that's aged terribly because that film very much is like just being inside the mind of a early 80s teenage metalhead. So it is just a lot of tits and swords and heavy metal. But then on the flip side, we had some great films, like a film about Mina from Life of Agony and her transition, which is that documentary's called The Sound of Scars, which is great. And we had The Goth Halves of Hardcore, which is about Agnostic Front. We had a really great film too, which people should, whenever they can see it, try and see it, called Stabbed in the Face.
Okay.
Which is about this band called Eat the Turnbuckle, who are a hardcore punk and wrestling band.
I love it.
So like all of their gigs are just like hardcore wrestling, and it's like hitting each other with barbed wire bats and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And it's a wild film. And the crowd we had were really funny for that, because like there were some wrestling fans, there were some hardcore fans, and then there were some people there who are my favourite people to have at Mosh, who are like not alternative music or metal fans at all. They're just like, I'm just going to come and watch this interesting sounding documentary.
Right.
And they were just sort of like cringing in the seat at all the violence, but absolutely loving it at the same time.
Oh, so good. And are you, off the back of it going so well, will that be returning next year, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a part of just the programme of the Mosh, because it is, for the most part, a kind of repertory festival. We do new stuff when it, as and when it comes out, when we can get it. We've just got a massive list of things we want to screen, but also just a massive list of things we want to watch as well. So it's about hunting them down and also just doing the homework to see what's going to come back next year.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your time, Greg. It's brilliant. Actually, before we go, I should mention that this is the one episode of The X-Files where Mulder bursts through the door and says, "Scully, you're not going to believe this." I really laughed at that. I was like, yeah, there she is. Her head's in her hands again. What she's going to put up with Mulder. But great episode.
Proper sitcom moment.
Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. If you like the show, please do hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you out there next time.